So here's something I want to get to because it happened yesterday. It was the big news, at least in my circles, where I pay attention to how technology and politics overlap and intermingle. Yesterday, there was a congressional hearing with four of the big tech company CEOs: Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, Sundar Pichai of Google, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, and having a mental block right now, and Tim Cook of Apple. And it was a hearing ostensibly on antitrust issues. The fact that these companies are just getting so big and basically monopolizing certain markets. And when a competitor does appear, they just buy the competitor out before there's any sort of competition. And this is a real serious issue, especially when you have companies that honestly are part of our life in so many, our everyday life in so many ways. I mean, I urge you to find a way, a single day where you don't somehow interact with something that Apple, Google, Facebook, or Amazon has control over. And even if you think you aren't, I bet you are. Going to Whole Foods, that's owned by Amazon. So even when it comes to the grocery store, these companies own you. So there was this hearing, but Republicans took the opportunity to talk about a more pressing matter when it comes to the tech companies, and that's the perceived bias against conservatives. The idea that these companies hate conservatism and Republicans and go out of their way to stifle and deplatform them and only them. And there was a lot of this. Jim Jordan really had some of the more hysterical moments where he got loud and the Democrat in charge of the hearing had to yell at him to put his mask on numerous occasions. But there was one Republican who I think sort of stole the show, actually, from Jim Jordan. And it was because the combination of two things. Usually at these tech hearings, one of the things people like to laugh at is just how not technologically savvy these Congress people, Democratic and Republican, are. And then, of course, there's the totally forgetting why they're there, whether it's antitrust or data privacy issues like previous hearings have been on. And they like to just talk about how Facebook isn't letting their conservative content hit number one everywhere on the platform. This combines both of those things, and we have this congressman from Florida to thank for that, I should say.
Mr. Pichai, I'd like to start with you, and I'm just going to illustrate my question with a factual incident that actually occurred to me. Several months ago, my wife called and said, hey, there's a good article on the Gateway Pundit that you should read. So out of curiosity, I was up here in Washington. Out of curiosity, I Googled Gateway Pundit. And it didn't show up on the first page, didn't show up on the second page. There was a bunch of different blogging sites about how there were disagreements with what was on the Gateway Pundit. But I actually had to type in gatewaypundit.com to get to it. Interestingly, Google didn't allow me to get to the actual website. That was a couple of months ago, before this hearing was set to be heard, before this hearing was noticed, before you knew that you would be appearing before us today, and that this is an issue that obviously conservatives and Republicans have had. Last week, after this hearing was noticed, I did the exact same thing here in the Capitol. And wouldn't you know it, I Googled Gateway Pundit, and that was the very first website that came up. Now, this isn't from a constituent in my district. This isn't from somebody telling me. This isn't a news report. I actually physically did this on my laptop here in the Capitol several months ago and then today. So clearly, something had happened between not being notified that you were going to be appearing before our committee and then last week knowing that you would be appearing before our committee, and suddenly conservative websites are now at the top of the bar when you search for them. So was there anything done at Google between a couple of months ago and last week or the week before you appearing today that has changed your approach to silencing conservative websites?
All right, you can end it there. And then we'll go back to that clip at 2 minutes and 30 seconds in a bit. But first of all, that's Florida Congressman Greg Stube. And number one, I first thought when I was watching this live yesterday was not shocking, but very concerning that a congressperson is going to the Gateway Pundit for information as regularly as it appears Greg Stoob does. This is a fairly far-right conspiratorial website. It has a lot of connections to white supremacists and alt-right figures, and not really a news website, regardless of whether you consider yourself to be a conservative or otherwise. Also, what he's complaining about is that the Gateway Pundit, Google decided that the Gateway Pundit isn't in fact a news site, and so they didn't admit the Gateway Pundit to its Google News platform. And as you know, when there's a breaking news and you go to Google to search that breaking news, if you type in whatever the story is, there's a select number of websites that appear at the top with their articles on the keyword search that you're looking up. They do this because they want you to see legitimate news sources at the top for these breaking stories. And, Google News is pretty open, actually, compared to some other news programs. There's a number of more, left-leaning and progressive media organizations allowed into Google News, as long as you're writing a written report. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's really helpful to people who have podcasts and video, but that's another story. But again, this is a separate product from search. They're allowed to not admit a organization that is not a news organization into the Google News service. And I mean, it gets worse, actually, because here is Greg Stoob's follow-up question to basically Google explaining what I just said to you to them. Brandon?
And we'll do our best to follow up, and I'll engage with your office to
we'll follow up on that. I've got a similar question. So I've been in elected politics for almost 10 years. And when I was in the Florida Senate and the state Senate, I never had a problem with my campaign emails being marked as spam or going to junk folders or anything along those lines. And we had 30, 40, 50,000 people on our email list. And suddenly I get elected to Congress, and I'm now up here in Washington, D.C., and my parents who have a Gmail account aren't getting my campaign emails. My supporters, just last week, one of my supporters called me and said, hey, I just want you to know this, that my Gmail account suddenly is taking your campaign emails that I've received for almost 10 years, and suddenly they're going to spam and junk folders. This appears to only be happening to conservative Republicans. I don't see anything in the news or anything in the press.
Absolutely wrong. Please, anyone listening to this, Jamie, Matt, Brendan, go check your spam folder right now. If you're signed up for anything, whatever it is, major companies, if you've ordered from Amazon or Target or wherever, if you've ordered from a small business, if you get emails from a Democratic candidate or congressperson, you will find emails from any of the people I just mentioned, any of the organizations I just mentioned, falling in your spam folder. And that's for one of two reasons, mostly for one of two reasons. Number one, when you subscribe to, when a company who wants to send out mass email campaigns subscribe to a service, they need to sort of make sure that that service has a good reputation with the major email providers, because these major email providers, Google included with Gmail, like to judge these email services by how much spam they usually send out, because they are email service providers that are known for, being friendly to random online drug email stores looking to email you, or other sort of spammy or scam type, businesses. So they say, if it's coming from a mailing service like that, it's most likely spam, because that's most of who that email service's clients are. So maybe Rep. Stoob needs to look into who his email service provider is for his campaign emails. The second reason, and this is going to hurt Stoob a little bit more, is that these algorithms also judge what's spam for each person personally based on what they open up when it comes to these mass emails, and also what people have previously marked as spam. So it's very likely that Mr. Stoob, Rep. Stoob, Congressman Stoob, mom and dad may have been getting your emails, but they weren't opening them. So Google assumed, hey, they don't want these. In the spam folder it goes. Sorry, buddy.
Oh.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Can you imagine having four of the biggest CEOs in the world, literally, not even just in the country, four of the most powerful people in the world? I mean, people who literally are on par with world leaders. You have them sitting in front of you via live stream, but there they are in front of you. You have 5 minutes to ask them anything, and your question is about your parents' Gmail account. Really? Well, unbelievable.
That's all these people care about. They don't care about the actual problem, which is that these private companies have way too much control over our data, over our speech activity, the ability to surveil us, and huge monopolies in the market. That's all fine with these people.